Gay rights movement hits home for one conservative senator. We're going to talk about that, but first we got more potentially troubling questions for a lawmaker from our region. Andrew?
Well, Rich, the Washington Post is reporting that New Jersey Democratic Senator Robert Menendez is now being investigated by a grand jury based in Miami. At question, did the senator cross the line when advocating for the business interests of a friend and campaign donor, Solomon Melgen? Menendez reportedly used his influence to pressure both the Dominican and U.S. governments in areas where it would be helpful to Melgen in the Dominican Republic over a port security contract, and with American federal healthcare officials who claim Melgen overbilled Washington for care at his health clinic. Menendez already repaid Melgen $58,000 for 2 trips to the Dominican Republic after questions about that trip arose. Menendez reportedly has not been contacted by agents or anyone else connected to the grand jury. He's also being investigated by the Senate Ethics Committee. Menendez, he says he welcomes any review and is convinced his actions were on the level. Elsewhere, a conservative Republican who was on Mitt Romney's shortlist for vice president now says he's reversed his positions on same-sex marriage and the Defense of Marriage Act after his 21-year-old son came out as gay. Ohio's Rob Portman announcing his shift in interviews with both CNN and several Ohio newspapers. Portman has continually voted against gay rights measures stretching back to his time in Congress in the 1990s. He said he did inform the Romney campaign of his son's sexuality before they selected Paul Ryan for the #2 slot. But Portman decided not to go public until now.
Did he ask you to change your position on gay marriage and gay issues?
Not initially. And in fact, I wasn't thinking about policy or positions. I was just thinking about him as my son and someone who I love very much and very proud of. So that was not an initial discussion. But over time, yeah, we started talking about that more, and he was helpful, as you can imagine, in giving me some of his perspective on it.
In an op-ed in today's Columbus Dispatch, Portman added, quote, "We conservatives believe in personal liberty and minimal government interference in people's lives. We also consider the family unit to be the fundamental building block of society. We should encourage people to make long-term commitments to each other and build families so as to foster strong, stable communities and promote personal responsibility." Portman basing that on comments made by conservative British Prime Minister David Cameron, who also supports same-sex marriage along similar ideological lines. Portman is now the only Senate Republican who openly supports same-sex marriage and is only one of 3 on Capitol Hill, joining House members Elena Ross-Lehtinen and Richard Hanna. Other notable GOP supporters include former VP Dick Cheney, former presidential candidate John Huntsman, and a group that also includes 3 former Republican governors and the most recent gubernatorial nominee from California. So you have to wonder if this is going to be the beginning of a divisive split within the Republican Party on same-sex marriage.
I think he just laid out, Tom, the best argument for Republicans to get behind this, the whole personal liberty argument. I've been wondering why forever they've been fighting this. Don't they want government out of people's bedrooms?
He clearly saw me say this 4 years ago, because that is exactly, basically my quote 4 years ago.
To audience, it's all about Tom, but go ahead.
But I'm making the point.
Tom for
I have been way out front as a Republican for gay marriage for a long time based on this. If you're a conservative, I want less government in my life. It's about individual liberty and freedom. And the point that just boggles my mind, it almost makes me wish that every Republican elected official in this country had a gay child. Why does it take having, why shouldn't you just look at it now? I would hope Portman would go to other members and say, what if your child was gay? Because that's what it takes. It took Dick Cheney to finally come around and come out on it.
But I mean, where is that empathy now, and why aren't more lawmakers employing that empathy in holding
and by
firm
the way,
to their
it's a
opposition?
political winner if you look at the polls.
Who?
The public wants it.
This is a no.
Yeah.
You know, 20 years from now, we're going to look back and say why.
Is, so I heard some people say, wait a minute, why is it okay that you change only because of your son? I happen to think it was good for him to do it, but some people criticize that he's flip-flopping. Is it okay for politicians to change their mind?
Of course it is. I mean, you don't want to elect somebody who's going to be so strident all the time. That's not how humans are, and they deal with experience and they work off of that. And so I commend him for doing that. Let me say, if he was attempting to contrast himself with the extreme right wing of his party, good job, because meanwhile CPAC is going on. You got a lot of crazy people talking about the opposite of civil liberty that he is, and he's doing a great job doing it.
If anybody comes after him in his party, there'll be a line.
And by the way, and this is a Republican issue.
It's also what piggybacking on what Tom just said, and I guess I'll ask you, because it's also what's wrong with politics. Why is it you don't see, take Democrat, Republican out of it, why is it you don't see the day of light until it affects your son? Why is it Everybody
Well, let's be
else's
honest,
son.
the president also struggled with this less than a year ago, right? I think this has been, for me,
That's fair.
The issue with the most velocity of change that I've
It's
seen.
incredible.
It's unbelievable. In '94, we were talking, my God, civil union, I don't know. And look at where we are now. It's the last one to the table. Too often it's Republicans to say, we know where this is going to end. Let's get ahead of
David
it.
Tyree had the nerve to go to Albany, my wonderful giant football player, and say the world was going to come to an end if New York passed gay marriage. It's ridiculous.
Yeah.
They pass gay marriage, the world continues.
Seems like a hypocrite.
Now,
Seems like a
Andrew, there's
hypocrite.
another story
All
that
of
I
them.
want to get
All
to,
of
and these
them.
guys' perspective on it's interesting. And it had to do with the video that had a large part to do why Mitt Romney didn't win.
Well, Mitt Romney thinks so. It was the hidden camera video that introduced America to what became the 2012 quote of the year. The video, of course, Mitt Romney speaking at a supporters-only gathering in last summer in Florida. 47% of Americans depended on the government. That made them all but locks to be Obama voters. Even Romney spoke recently about how damaging the clip was. The video's back in the news because the guy who recorded it, bartender Scott Prouty, has finally gone public. He's raising cash for his legal defense. He says he didn't plan to record the governor. He just happened to have the camera with him, and then when he heard what he was saying, he hit record on it. But regardless of that, and whether you believe whether he's out to do this, is there any place?
Well, and that was our question this morning. Dominic, can I ask you? To me, you've covered a lot of events where people don't even tell you what's off the record till after they'd say it, right? That's changed. But also the idea, there were rooms people would go into. And even if there was a journalist there, they knew they could say whatever and it wasn't going to get in the print or it wasn't going to be on TV. That's dead now, isn't it?
For example, if I told you half of the things Bloomberg has said in front of me in private, he perhaps would no longer be mayor of New York City. And he got into it, as a matter of fact, over that Atkins diet comment with the firefighters, made Page One News. As a journalist, and these guys can tell you, but as a journalist, generally, everything is on the record. My rule of thumb is it's not on record until you say it's on the record. But with these cell phones, you have to be careful everything you say because everything becomes part of your stump speech. And I'm sure these guys will tell you exactly the same thing.
You counsel your guys.
Of
you know,
course.
there are no, even the back of the plane, you got to be careful what you say now, right?
You go into it, listen, we've always said this, regardless of, always know that whatever you say it knowing full well it could be the front page of the newspaper. And that's the way it should be, because quite frankly, listen, I think there are moments like, I've had with the governor, we've laughed, et cetera, et cetera. But I think Evan and I, we wouldn't want to work for a hypocrite, somebody who behind closed doors is saying, oh, that effing so-and-so, and then, oh, hey, there he is, he's a great guy. Be who you are.
That's right.
And the problem with the Romney video was this, is that is what America thought of Mitt Romney. That he was, it just confirmed everything. It wasn't the video, it just that it confirmed what they already had believed in the guy.
How do you counsel clients differently now than you would have 10 years ago with the advent of the camera phone?
Well, I mean, message discipline is more important than ever, that's for sure. But look, what Tom said is absolutely right. You can't have two versions of who you are. You really can't. And if the version of who you are is controversial, figure out a way to sell that. Right. Today's controversy is tomorrow's consensus. You can figure out how to do that if you are a good politician, if you have good people behind you, and if you have good ideas. And so the best case scenario is just to say what you mean all the time. And obviously Romney was not like that. He was not like that from the beginning, and that was really why he got in trouble.
Remember when Allen was running, that Macaca comment that he said? That sealed it for him and stuff. And did you write that down? Today's controversy, tomorrow's consensus. That was pretty good.
But who he was insensitive.
There you go. We take a quick break, but when we come back, we're going to ask our panel what they would do if they were Bloomberg for a day, who decides basically whatever he decides. That's the law of the land here. Would you ban bagels, sugar, whatever? Ban people talking on cell phones? We'll talk about that and also another interesting New York City story after this. Stay with us.